Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Well, hey there, and welcome back. Today, I want to answer a question that was submitted to me by one of my members of the Elementary Music Teacher Academy. And this question asks, what do I do with one student who's constantly interrupting activities and continually blurting out in class? And so in episode 5, I gave some general classroom management strategies that you can use with your students. But in this episode, I want to talk about how to address maybe one child in that one class you have that is just your behavior problem. I don't like to label students because, I don't know, I feel like kids walk around with labels on them, right? How many of you, before you even get your classes, the very first time they come to the music room, there is a teacher that's always like, oh, watch out for Johnny. He's the one that's always this or that. And then you get Johnny in music and you have no problems with him. Sometimes that's the case. And a lot of times that was the case for me. But sometimes you get a child who maybe they're not a behavior problem everywhere else, or maybe they are, and then they continue that behavior problem in music class. So how do you deal with that child? How can you correct them or help them succeed in the music classroom without constantly interrupting your teaching time? So here's some suggestions I gave to this member. I said, always be certain that students who, no matter how much you're always going to have certain students that no matter how hard you try and how many times you remind them, they continue to be disrespectful. So my first point is, don't take this personally, okay? There's always going to be certain students who you are trying so hard to reach. You're pouring into this child every time they come into your classroom. But it still feels like you're making no ground. You're making no progress with them. You feel like no matter what you do, they're fighting tooth and nail against you. You guys, in my personal life, can I just tell you, I have a son like that. Our oldest son, who's 8 years old, he's our son I've mentioned before. He has autism. He's high functioning, but we constantly feel like that. And he's having trouble at school right now with, not behaviorally, but just following directions. And he's that child who, no matter how many times you tell him, it's like he's not doing what you say. And it is frustrating. It's frustrating as a parent or a teacher to have that one child who you feel like you've tried every strategy you can ever think of, and then it's just not happening. So the same advice I gave myself when I was in the classroom, but also as a parent, is not to take it personally, because these kids are not doing this against you. There's just some things they're dealing with probably that is out of your control. Okay, so now that you know that, what can you do? The first thing I want to tell you that if a child's being disrespectful by laughing or blurting out, do not hesitate to sit them out of an activity. I know not a lot of teachers, but I know some teachers don't want to do this because, first of all, you're trying to assess these kids, but second of all, you don't want to come across as the bad guy, right? You don't want to be viewed as mean, and then you feel like it's going to push that child away even more. Well, here's the thing. A lot of times, just simply, and you don't need to be mean about it, it's not like you're even putting them in timeout per se, but a lot of times just having this child sit out of an activity, maybe it's something they really want to do. Like maybe they don't care so much about singing, but maybe it's the day that you did a lot with technology. And sitting this child out even just one time, a lot of times that helps a lot because they're seeing, oh wait, I can't pull this one over on her or him because they are not going to let me. If I act out, I'm not going to get to participate, and I don't want to do that. So a lot of times just sitting out one time will make them want to not sit out again, if that makes sense. Okay. But another thing you can do is tell them that if they talk or interrupt again, they're going to write about the activity you're doing instead of participating. This method worked great for me. I'm not going to go in hugely into my background again, but I taught at a very high inner city school. The demographic was very inner city kids who a lot of behavior issues. And so I had to come up with some strategies and be pretty tough on these children, and then I could loosen up as the year went on. But that method worked really well for me because the kids, they don't want to write in music class. I mean, the occasional, yes, I'm not talking about the occasional worksheet or the occasional come up on the board and write something. I'm talking about write about this activity we're doing instead of doing the activity. So for instance, let's say that you are doing a mallet activity, right, on the xylophones, and you have taught your class how to play an ostinato, okay, using, I don't know, a G chord. And you showed them a rhythm to play, and you've told them how many beats to play, and you've told them what part of the song to play in. You've gone all the way through the lesson. Well, the child who's not able to participate that day, they're going to need to write down every step of the directions you gave on a piece of paper. And they're not going to like it, and they're not going to be able to participate until they finish it. That is something that works. It may not be something you're comfortable doing, and that's okay. I'm just giving you some strategies that worked well for me, and if you want to use them, great. If not, then I'm going to give you some more things that you may be able to try. But I want you to know that it is okay sometimes to get stern and to show tough love. All right? Sometimes, like I said, that just needs to happen once. And then the child will, not always, but sometimes will usually turn their behavior around because they don't want to be, quote unquote, in trouble. But the other good thing I've noticed about having that child write or sitting that child out is, what do you think the rest of the class is noticing? They're noticing what you're doing, right? They're noticing, oh man, or oh snap, as my students would say. I don't want to do what that child's doing because I don't want to write. I want to participate. Okay? So the rest of the class is kind of watching this go down, and they are seeing you. They're seeing it happen, and they're like, okay, so I understand now. She gives warnings. She's pretty graceful. She's pretty patient, but when I push her to her limit, or when she thinks, this isn't working, then she's going to sit me out, or she's going to make me write. Okay, so the next thing you can try with the students who don't raise their hands and interrupt as you're teaching, tell them they're only allowed to ask questions after you give instructions. What I mean is, okay, so you're probably going to have one or two students who are your constant hand raisers. And then when you ask them, okay, yes, what's your question? It has nothing to do with what you're teaching. They're asking about what their dog ate for dinner last night as you're in the middle of talking about melody and form, right? So let your students know ahead of time. This may sound so simple because you're like, well, wait, this is something they're just supposed to know. Yeah, it is. But a lot of times the kids, although they've been told this in their regular classroom, sometimes they think when they come to music, the same rules don't apply. So this is part of going back over procedures, but making sure your students know, if you raise your hand, first of all, you need to know, you need to have an actual question. And second of all, we're not raising our hand until I've already given instructions. They need to know that, because you could spend 10 to 15 minutes just answering questions before you've even started teaching your lesson. So the child who's interrupting, maybe sometimes they just need a reminder. Maybe they're just not aware that they're supposed to raise their hand or wait for you to teach, although that sounds really ridiculous, right? But sometimes just simply looking, something about eye contact too. You know what I mean? Sometimes just looking at that child in the eye and saying, put your hand down, and you're not raising your hand until I give instructions. Wait for me to teach. And then they'll put their hand down and like, oh, they don't like to be called out. It's not about embarrassing these kids. That's not what I'm saying. It's not about embarrassing them or making them feel like they're going to be called out and embarrassed. It's just a matter of eye contact as a teacher, making sure they're aware that your hand is not going up until I finish teaching, and you're raising your hand to ask a question. Then if you blurt out, we go back to what I said earlier, those steps, right? You can give warnings, of course, but with your older students, they don't need as many warnings because they do know. They do know, they're just not doing it. So the next thing I want to talk about is if you have these constant talkers that these are just kids who, I have one of these children too. My middle son is this way. He would talk to like an empty bucket sitting next to him. You're just going to have kids like this who, no matter what you say, they just want to talk. They're just your talkers, and they realize there's stuff to do in music class. They realize that you're busy and that you need to teach them and that you got things to do, but they still got so much to tell you. Maybe they're just excited to see you. Maybe they've been holding this in all week and they've been like, oh my gosh, I really got to tell her. I got to tell her. And then they get there and they're just so excited to tell you. So one thing that's really good to do is allow 5 minutes before or after class to just have fun conversations. So this is opposite of just being stern. They need to see sometimes that you are like, oh, you do care about them, right? And they need to know that. So you're allowing even just 5 minutes of conversations, and you're maybe if you save it for the end of class, you're only letting those students who have been participating, not interrupting, not talking out, being able to tell you a story about something. Okay? And maybe you tell them, okay, each time I'm only going to call 3 kids and I'm observing and watching the whole time. And sometimes for kids, this is a huge motivator because they really want to tell you stories. They really want to talk to you and get to know you on a personal level. And so sometimes just letting them know I'm watching and I'm aware and I'm going to have, I'm going to be calling three students to tell me something at the end of class. So make sure you're doing what you need to do. And so those are some pointers I have for you. And the other question, real quick, I want to answer is, so there, with the interrupting child, sometimes this child is the one who's always maybe your tattletale, or the one who's always, telling you what other children do wrong or what they think is, they're not worried about themselves so much, but they're worried about what everybody else is doing. So maybe that's the kind of interruptions you're getting. And if so, it's very frustrating, first of all, when I say that, right? And so it can get kind of annoying, but make sure they know that, first of all, what your expectations are. And then one thing to alleviate this is to have a student of the week. Okay, maybe in their classroom they already have a student of the week, so that makes it easy for you. So that student is also the student of the week in music. But maybe it isn't, and the way you pick a student of the week is by their behavior the week before. And maybe you only see your classes once a week, and so that class period you had before, that you picked one student from that class, the following time they came, they are your student who gets to pass out anything, they get to line up first, they get to help hand out instruments, and they kind of get to monitor behavior and help you out with that, okay? So that way, that one child who's always wanting to be the policeman in your classroom, they're not able to unless they're student of the week, and you're letting them know, listen, you know what? I'm really relying on this student over here because they're my student of the week. I do appreciate you letting me know about this stuff, but you just need to worry about you. So that will help alleviate that as well. So I hope those tips help. I know those like super quick pointers, but I hope it's something that you can apply to your classroom today, and that you are able to, if you have that one child who's always interrupting or causing behavior issues, just some simple strategies sometimes really do go a long way. And honestly, if you have something you've been trying, it's not working, please know that it's okay to change things up and to just keep trying until you find something that sticks, until you find something that works. And don't give up on that child, but I also want to remind you, don't take it personally, and know that you are doing the best you can do. And sometimes, no matter how much you try and how much effort you're giving to that one child, you may not make as much progress as you're wanting to, and it's not you, and it's okay. So I hope these pointers help. If you have any questions or comments about this, or have anything else you want to discuss about this, feel free to direct message me on Instagram at Jessica Peresta, or email me at jessica@thedomesticmusician.com. All right, you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.